recording this. Just a note that the recording only records the speaker on screen, so all of you don't have to worry about being recorded if you want to leave your videos on. There will be time at the end for a Q&A, so at that time, if you do request to be on screen, you will be recorded. And if you're uncomfortable, you can always use the chat box to ask your question. These happen every Thursday, and I'm so happy that we're doing this because we can have different teachers and different voices every week educating on a different topic. And this week we have LaNicia Duke. This is the first time that LaNicia is here with us, and I'm looking forward to what LaNicia has to say today. These are always donation-based. No one turned away due to lack of funds, and so thank you all for your donations. Thank you for being here and for your presence. I usually do announcements at the end, but with the nature of this webinar and with how many people we have on the call, I'm going to make a few announcements right now. First, these webinars happen every Thursday, 2 p.m. PST. Second, we are doing a day of retreat for people who identify as non-POC. This one is called Caucus to Collectivity, Dismantling Racism from a White Identified Perspective. This is going to be Saturday, July 25th, and it's going to be led by 3 of our white identified Presence Collective teachers. And I know that we're going to be doing a POC retreat in the future, so stay tuned for that. And last but not least, Caverly Morgan, who is one of the Presence Collective teachers and the founder, she is doing something through SAND, the Science and Non-Duality Conference and entity. They are doing a series that happens in August, Saturdays in August, talking about racism. So I will include all of these links in the chat box. LaNicia, welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you. I am so humbled to be joining you today. And I want to thank Caverly Morgan and Presence Collective for sharing their space and their platform with me today. And we are going to jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. So I have a presentation here. And today we're going to be talking about how to talk about race in rural communities. Again, my name is LaNicia Duke, and I am your host for the next hour. We are going to try our best to stay on a timeline. So here is an agenda for you. I'm going to adjust just a little bit as we're already a little behind, but the first thing we're going to do is establish our boundaries. And then we're going to go into a mindfulness moment where we connect to our heart. We'll go from there to the conversation that we're going to delve into today. And my topic is going to be the deeper we go, the better we grow. And then we're going to spend hopefully the majority of our time together in Q&A. So as I'm talking, I am actually just going to try to go exactly by the slides and not veer too off to sidetrack too much so that we can get to the question and answers, because I know that there are a lot of questions and I cannot promise that I have all the answers, but I look forward to using this time to grow together and learn together. And then we'll have another mindfulness moment in the end. So we will be posting this presentation on my website, as well as Presence Collective will also have access to it. And so if you miss anything, this will be available to you after today. And so, let's see, wrong slide. So we are going to go to our, I'm sorry. So we're going to go to our boundaries real quick, and just so we can set some ground rules. We are going today be looking at identifying ways to remove labels. And I know for a lot of us right now, labels are really important to us, and I want to honor that, and I value that. But part of the mission statement for the Love Coalition is actually being able to remove labels, which sometimes takes barriers away for us to be able to learn and grow together. We're going to practice compassionate listening. I ask that you're slow to speak and quick to listen. As I'm talking, if you have a question that pops up in your mind, I know for me, sometimes I get so focused on trying to hold on to that thought in my head that I lose where we are. And so if you have a pen and paper next to you, feel free to just jot your question down, and then you'll be able to reconnect and focus with us. The next thing we're going to do is be mindful of others' experiences and practice empathy. And that is going to be, for me, probably one of the more important things that we focus on today. In having these conversations that are difficult to have, we really have to be mindful that everyone is entitled to their authentic truth. We might understand some of it, we might not even agree with it, but it's not our job to take away someone's truth. If you have a question during the Q&A session, raise your hand in the chat box, or you can type your question in the comment section, and Alyssa will unmute you so that you can speak. Give yourself permission to take a break. If you need to stand up, stretch, get a glass of water, stretch a little bit, you are more than welcome to do that. Open your heart and focus less on changing someone's mind. I think that we are spending a lot of energy in great places right now, and some of the feedback I've been getting is that a lot of people are tired and fatigued. And so today we are just going to all exhale together. And lastly, you have a choice to participate as much or as little as you like. So for our mindfulness moment, we're going to look at how we connect to our spirit, or whatever you refer to as the essence of your existence. I'd like for us to connect to our core so we know the root from which all of our intentions grow. And I'm very thankful. I had a conversation with Caverly last week in preparation, because as I practice meditation, it's different than some of the Buddhist tradition. I'm a fourth generation preacher's kid, and I actually prefer to do my meditation time while singing. And so as we're doing this, I am going to just sing one word, a chorus of it. I am not here to push religion or to push anything like that, but I want to share a personal experience with you. And this is how I sit and I'm able to ground myself. So for our first exercise, if you'll just take a couple of moments with me and allow yourself to release any anxiety, any anger, any frustration, any hopelessness, any guilt, or anything right now that feels like a heavy weight for you or a burden. Just gonna take a moment and just, I have company behind me, sorry, and just find something that you'd like to release while we're on this chat together. You can close your eyes, you can leave them open, but just begin to inhale, deep breath in, and a deep breath out. And just continue to breathe in and breathe out. Hallelujah. 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 Thank you, everyone. So before I begin, today is a very special day for me and my family. My grandmother, today is the 100th anniversary of the day of her birth. She was born July 9th, 1919 in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And when we started talking about hosting this discussion several weeks ago, and I was given a choice for dates, I specifically chose this date so that I could honor my grandmother. And it's bittersweet because she died on my birthday on December 9th in 2011. And so I just want to take this moment. Anyone who has someone special holding that they keep in their heart, I would like to pay homage and honor and tribute to them right now. And just knowing that I am so honored and blessed to know that my grandma, my grandpa are smiling down on us right now. So when I first began preparing for today, I had a whole different presentation prepared. But I needed to take a step back and build a good foundation, because the work that we are endeavoring in, the future that we look to enter into, is not going to happen quickly. And I definitely believe if we want to have sustainable change and sustainable growth, we've got to begin building the right foundation. And so as we begin to talk about race in rural communities and even in urban communities, it's important that we come with an open heart. And as our heart opens, our hearts will soften. And we can identify the absolute truth that is at our core. One of my favorite proverbs is, "Guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life." It is also important that in this process that we begin to renew our minds. Every year, right before my birthday, I go into a process where I evaluate where I am, where I've been, and where I'm looking to go. And I've learned over the years that sometimes I have to let go of ideas and truths that I really held dear to me so that I can continue to expand in my growth process and in the things that I'm thinking, the things that I'm saying, and the things that I'm doing. So as your heart changes, our minds begin to think differently. Be mindful of what we are saying at this time. What is at the core of your message? It's really important right now that we make sure that what we are saying is our authentic truth. And even though we have a lot of common and shared truths, it's really important that we aren't taking someone else's truth and bearing their burden to try to share it, because we all have a truth to share during this time. And then watch what happens. When we change and grow more on the inside, just from the experience that I've had in growth in my own personal experience, everything around you will begin to change as your actions become more intentionally aligned with having a healthy heart, which to me is the most important in being able to have some difficult conversations. And as we've been going through this time, I've even had to take a step back and give myself time to breathe and give myself permission to rest. I've recently challenged myself for the next 7 days to not reply with disagreement on anyone's social media postings right now. I'm trying to work on practicing compassionate listening in a different way. And sometimes it's just being able to read someone's words or listen to someone's words and just listen with no response, no rebuttal, no but just let them be able to share their truth without putting a negative connotation on it, even when I don't agree with it. Are we responding from a place of conditioning or a place of wholeness? Social media is a wonderful tool, but it sometimes can be our own worst enemy as we are using memes to react or respond. And it's important that we begin taking time to find our own individual place of authenticity so that we can move forward in spite of a lot of the opposition that we're faced with right now. It's okay to take the time to find your own words. Or if you're going to use a meme, before you click share, really ask yourself, is this really speaking words that I would say from my own heart? Know that it's okay to say I don't know, and it is okay to self-correct. It's also okay to ask for help. And just an encouragement, give yourself about a week or so to disengage. It doesn't mean that you're not engaged, but to disengage from commenting or from disagreeing or from asserting yourself. I think we all need to take time right now to re-examine our own hearts and make sure that every reaction to what we see, hear, or do is coming from a place of wholeness and a place of healing. That's how we will become a part of our solution in whatever demographics our communities look like. In the work that I've been doing over the last 5 years with the Love Coalition, I have learned that it's important to focus just as much or more on building relationships instead of looking for allies. Sometimes we're preaching to the choir, and it's easier to put labels on those who don't sing in the amen chorus. But I have had some of the most amazing experiences, if nothing else, even just with my husband. We are from two totally different backgrounds, two totally different, I won't say belief systems, but cultures and where we form our belief systems. And our relationship is purely authentic, and we can find places where we can grow together and learn from each other. But especially in our rural communities, I believe that we pride ourselves in not looking like the rest of this country or the world. And we have to make sure, even now, I think more so now, that our message resonates with all, or at least most of our neighbors and not just our allies. And we've got to build trust and not just bring past experiences to a new opportunity to grow better communities. And so my aunt, she told me about a month ago that I needed to sort of bring in my anger in the tone of some of my social media posts. And at the time I heard her, but I just didn't know how that was going to happen. And it wasn't, and this was before George Floyd was murdered. This was even before the coronavirus pandemic, but it was really built on daily experiences that I had living in Utah. And that's a whole nother subject in itself, but it was just a daily compounding of different experiences that began to just take punches at my soul, really. And it was really hard for me to come out of that anger because it was something new to make me angry every day. And so I just encourage you that if you see yourself expressing more anger than compassion or empathy or grace or love in these times, to take a step back to make sure that each new day, each new conversation is an opportunity for something new to happen. Ask yourself these questions before you act. Am I sowing peace or discord, even when we think we're doing the right thing? Am I being part of the solution, or am I being part of the problem? And this is really big right now, even when we're posting online, because some social media groups that I've been observing and interacting in, it's really hard to watch people who are supposed to be fighting for the same cause now fighting against each other. Is what I'm thinking, saying, doing, building better communities, or continuing to add to the divide and separation? This is talking about what language are we using, and really how are we interjecting ourselves to make a better change in our communities. And instead of, I hear this a lot, now I've lived in rural communities now for the last 6 years, and I hear this more and more. Instead of responding and thinking it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, Consider just because something is permissible doesn't mean it's beneficial. This one we will delve into. I am very hopeful that this is going to be the first part in a series of having a conversation about how we talk about race in rural communities and rural race talks. And so please bear with me. I know this is about to be a really short intro into a much bigger conversation, but that's why I want to get to the Q&A part. So I have found over the last several years in building the Love Coalition and really building the foundation for our mission is that when we are able to come together in community and remove labels and find a common core message that is authentic to our individual community, it's really the catalyst for building a sustainable foundation for effective change. So for instance, there's a lot of stuff happening in Portland that we cannot translate here in Tillamook County. There's some stuff that are interchangeable, but our communities look different. They operate differently. And so it's really important that we find a way to take the bigger message and translate it to our broader community so that we are building on something instead of continuing to build barriers. So here's what labels look like. Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, the LGBTQ plus community, Latinx community, Asian community, immigrant community, the illegal immigrant community, Hispanic community, people experiencing disabilities community, low income community, food insecure community. The list could go on and on. And please know, I am not related to Candace Owens. I am not related to other people in the Black community who are expressing disdain and a whole different kind of conversation for Black Lives Matter. But I really believe as we're moving forward, all of our lives intersect. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 bullets on this list, and my life intersects with all of them. And so if we're able to come to the table as neighbors, it may be easier to be able to have some of these conversations. And then we grow into talking about these labels, but because we've already built a relationship and a foundation of trust and an environment of a safe space for us to be able to then engage in these conversations, I think we'll go a little bit further in the work that we're trying to do. The vision that came to me, we're all holding separate umbrellas, but we're all standing under the same rain. And how can we all join together under one umbrella and stand against the rain together? So when the sun finally shows itself, we will already be standing together in solidarity. All right, so we are going, and again, I want to apologize. I know that's a lot, but I also know that there will be a lot more. And so now we are going to open up the audience questions portion. Again, I may or may not have a question for you. This will be an ongoing dialogue. My contact information will be at the end, the last slide. But just so you can reach me on Facebook, LaNicia Duke. If you would like to sign up for the newsletter for the Love Coalition, so we can start maybe answering a question a day in that format, you can go to the Love Coalition's page on Facebook as well, send me an email, and again, all of that information will be at the end. And so, Alyssa, we're going to work together now and be able to get some questions going for you guys. So I'm going to stop the share right now. There we go. So we can see each other. And I just see someone correcting me, and thank you, undocumented immigrant community instead of saying illegal immigrant community. So I want to thank you for that. And again, we are all in an unlearning and relearning process. And so I hope that during this time that we remain patient with each other and have grace, as I am still learning, being mindful of using pronouns, but I'm very thankful that when I say something wrong, I can at least quickly go, oh, I just messed up, my bad, instead of giving that space. And so thank you for your correction. All right. So I have one from Aaron. I struggle with calling these identities labels. They are core parts of who we are. How do I come to the table without my core identity? Wow, that's a great question. And one that's heavy. And I too, I question often how to identify myself. I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm an author, I'm a singer, I'm a blogger, I'm Gwendolyn's daughter, I'm John's wife now. I have a lot of labels. For me, I'm heterosexual. I am, like all these things. And here's my challenge right now. I think labels are different than identity. And I think that is something maybe to grow into conversation about. But I am learning to identify by my value system more than a label, if that sort of can put a context for what my distinction is right now. And so I want to come to a table where honesty is an identity being honest is one of the identities that I have, and being authentic instead of because again, we can grow into learning more about other parts of who we are. But I'll give a perfect example and then I'll move on. And again, I think this would be a great subsection to have a different conversation, a bigger conversation about. When I first moved to the coast, I had just been on a pretty long spiritual journey. And I'm a fourth generation preacher's kid. I was raised in church, and it took me about 10 years to reconcile who and what God and spirit and faith was going to be like for me. And I grew up in community where most of my community circles were Christian or faith-based. And so moving to Oregon had to teach me that even though my spirituality and my faith is at the core of my identity, I had to find different ways to express or to live it instead of just talking about it, so that I could be more inclusive for people who may not believe in faith the way I do, who may not believe in faith at all. And so it's really not taking away from who we are, but being able to make room for other people. And again, that's a hard one. It took me 5 years, well, probably a good 2 years, my first 2 years in Oregon, to really be able to reconcile how I stay authentic to my core authentic identity while being mindful of other people's experience. All right, so here's a question I'm going to read. I'm a kindergarten teacher in a rural community outside of Bend. I want to use my position to be an advocate for social justice, Black Lives Matter, and similar movements, but I want to be careful and respectful. How do I start these conversations? Well, I think that there's several tools that are available to you. I would first suggest to see if your district that you work for has an equity or a diversity director or a committee or something. And then outside of that, I would, and I just had this experience actually where I was just working where I sat down with my administrators and just asked, what's appropriate? What are conversations that we can have? I was actually the first Black person to work at the school that I was just at for the last school year. And so it was a lot of uncomfortable moments because we were all learning together. And so I think when you start from a place of commonality, then it's easier to grow in some of these tougher conversations. And I just want to check in with Alyssa. Are there any hands up that I don't see just yet? Okay. All right. So, what are my thoughts on facts versus feelings? For example, there are folks on this call who are doing the work of addressing social inequities in the systems of rural communities like food justice. This is a very fact-based situation that often elicits feeling-based reactions from the dominant culture. What's your recommendation for something like this? One of the things that I've had to learn is how to speak my truth in love. And it's not always easy because sometimes you just want to rip into people. And I think sometimes our reaction does come from emotion. And again, I think a lot has to do with how we set the tone for how we're moving our work forward. And so if we start the work in anger and in agitation or in negative emotion, the foundation is being built around that. And so a lot of this work that I'm involved in with the Love Coalition is really being able to build that frame, again, with compassion, with grace, and with love. And facts are important right now. I think we are, we're really heavy into data collection, being able to use, what's happened to measure what growth, what needs to happen. And I think when we get in these conversations that go from fact to emotion, we have to allow space to be able to say, all right, maybe we all need to take a break. And instead of trying to beat the nail, the hammer so that somebody gets something, we just need to pause because we don't, and start giving people room to even start to identify where those feelings are coming from. And we can help grow in several areas, not just race or food insecurity or anything like that, but it's really how we approach the work ourselves and how we give people the opportunity to grow with us in the work instead of trying to keep doing the work, leaving people behind. And I think maybe one of the things that I would like to just interject right here, my main focus in even some of the stuff that we're working on here in Tillamook County is to not be so quick to file legislation or to get our elected leaders to do. I'm looking for us right now to build a community table that we can all sit at and grow from, because everybody is not in the same place. Even some of us who have been actively involved in this work for years or decades, it's a time for all of us to just re-examine where we are, because we're in a different place. And I think even us that are working for justice and inclusion and equity and equality, I think we all need to give space for us to re-examine where we've been so we can see how we need to adjust for how we need to move forward. What strategies do you use when dealing specifically with white fragility? I have a unique experience growing up as a Black woman in this country. My mom is probably on this call and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe I have never lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood or community. All right. And so I have always grown up in white homogenous society. I'm used to being the only Black kid in my class. Even though I'm thankful some parts of private school, I was able to, go to a school that had a Black administrator, and our PE coaches, Coach Helen and Coach Larry, and several of my teachers were not only white, but they were Latino and Black. And so I was able to have a couple of different experiences. And one of the things that my mom always says about me is that I'm the president of the United Nations. And so I know recently, I'm not sure when this started, where groups have been separating themselves by race, ethnicity, by gender, so that they can create safe spaces. And I'm not doing this to mock it, but to just put that moniker around it, because they're building safe spaces to be able to share experience with with people who identify the same. And I have a problem with that, because my thing is, how do we really truly learn how to have some of these difficult conversations and grow when we're continuing to separate ourselves? And I know that that is probably not a popular answer. I saw it a couple of times at some conferences that I attended in the fall. And it was really hard for me, because, like, for me, I can't have that experience in my home because I'm a Black woman and my husband is a white man. And so we have to have these conversations together. I can't compartmentalize. And I'm really trying to be careful with using terms, again, like, to me, that's a label, right? White fragility, even though it's packed with really good stuff. If you're starting with that with someone who is just even thinking about walking into the door to take a seat at the table, we might not want to start there. All right, I'm going to take a pause, have a sip of water, read the next question. All right, regarding a focus on relationship, how do we prioritize that, given that we know that changing racist systems changes racist behavior, not the other way around? I am referencing IBM Kennedy and a book called Divided by Faith that addresses how individualism in Western evangelism actually upholds racist systems. Example, personal relationship theology. That's an important piece for me because I am a woman of faith, and I'm actually reading a book right now. I had to stop because I do know that I started to get angry as I was reading it, as things started to arise. And so I've read half of it and I put it down. It's actually called The Color of Compromise. And it talks about the church's complicitness to racism. And so thank you for that question. Changing a racist system changes racist behavior. Yes. But I'll offer you a different way to think of this. So I watched The Best of Enemies. It is a movie, a true story about the desegregation of schools in Durham, North Carolina. And that movie really inspired me because it brought the head of the KKK and the head of the Black community together, and they actually had to learn how to bring their communities together. So they were not working with allies when that started, but they were able to build relationship and partnership to grow their community in a better way. And my biggest takeaway from that movie, which touches on your question, is we can change laws, but we can't change people's hearts with those laws. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing now. Yes, we had the Civil Rights Act. Every single part of my life, including my marriage, is based on a Supreme Court decision. And so when you look at the laws that have already been changed and the place that we're still in, it sort of looks to me as if it's time to say, okay, we've got these laws implemented, so we're covered by the law, but I deal with people. I don't deal with the law. And so how is the law affecting how I deal with people? Now, they can't prevent me necessarily. Well, and I guess they can, because my husband and I had experience in Utah where we are pretty certain, after I spent the day calling for apartments to see if they were available, waiting for John to get off work. As soon as he would get off work, we'd go to the same apartment that I called that day that had something available. And as soon as we walked in the door together, they had nothing. And so that still happens. And so, again, we've changed some of these racist we put some laws in place, but people's hearts is where a lot of this stems from. And again, I'll go back to that proverb that I like: guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And so everything that we do, it comes from our heart. And so to be able to really connect with people where all of our hearts are open. I'm a firm believer, until we can hurt together, we cannot heal together. And so a lot of us like to be, we're shielded from some of that. But it's going to take being in some uncomfortable places for all of us to be able to grow in this. And I do see a hand raised that I want to acknowledge, Alyssa. So I don't want to mispronounce your name. Did you see that, Alyssa? It was just one, I think. Okay, thank you. So go ahead. Keisha, was that what it was?
It's pronounced Keisha.
Keisha, sorry, thank you.
Yeah. So I actually typed in my question.
Oh, so you want to read it for me then, please, so I don't go down?
Sure. So you mentioned, and I joined the meeting late because I had I wasn't able to. I had difficulties joining in.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, thanks. So I don't know if you discussed this earlier and I just missed it, but you talked about terms and labels.
Yes.
The terms that I heard you mention, I've never considered them as labels. They're terms, and I believe that terms are necessary to give meaning and insight and definition to issues and concerns that people have that we may not be able to articulate. It creates understanding, and understanding and knowledge is necessary to move forward. So the terms that you use, I don't understand how you consider them labels. And yeah, and you've also mentioned giving people space and giving people room. The problem is equal space hasn't been given to everyone. And that's the problem.
Keisha, can I ask where you live?
I live in Seattle, Washington.
Okay. So do you mind, we're going to meet you now and I'll answer your question. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I asked where you live because living in a city, a metropolitan area, is definitely different than having these conversations in a rural area. So, and I will give you so in Tillamook County, there are 26,000 residents. There are probably only 24 Black people in Tillamook County. It might be a couple more. I'm not sure, but it's a really, really, really low percentage. And so I was trying to wait and have this conversation later, but I'm just going to dive into it. And we're going to keep a record of all of these other questions because I know that we're not going to get to them today. But like I said, if you guys sign up, we can address these at a later date. So, and I'll just use my husband and I. When we first got together in 2018, I almost left my husband as we were dating after a discussion on Black Lives Matter. It was a really heavy discussion. It was one that we just butted heads. We disagreed on everything. It was in particular to Colin Kaepernick and kneeling during the national anthem. And I still am at a place where there are certain things that I won't compromise. And I told him that day that I'd never in my life until that moment wished that God hadn't made me a Black girl. I did not leave my husband, and I'm very thankful that I didn't. Sorry. Over the last month, we have had to have really, really, really hard conversations. My husband didn't meet a Black person until he was 20. He lived in rural community. And even after he started meeting people who were different from them, he still was able to hold on to an ideology because a lot of this other stuff never affected him personally. And it wasn't until he married me, or we began dating 2.5 years ago, that he had to have a different experience. And he chose to have that experience because we chose to be together. And so when I talk about making room, and again, I am not trying to diminish how people identify. I'm not trying to diminish. I don't know everything. I am speaking from my own personal experience. And so I want to acknowledge we all have different experiences. But the growth that I've been able to experience in communicating with my husband, in learning with my husband, in growing with my husband, and this may or may not answer your question. If I had come home after May 25th and just been like, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, my husband would not have received anything else that I had to say. And I can say that because I'm speaking to a very specific circumstance of me and my husband. We talked about everything that Black Lives Matter entailed, but I never said Black Lives Matter because his heart was open. And I wanted to make sure that something I said wasn't going to be the door that shut it for him to lock that key, to lock that door again. And so in my younger brother, his name is Philip Jacobs. Look him up. Sharp Skills is his rap name. My younger brother has a whole different conversation as it relates to race, but he lives in University Place in Washington. And it's a different experience there. And so I think my biggest point here is that we have to be mindful of who our audience is. If we are just trying to push forward an agenda and not really care about building community, these talks probably are not going to be very beneficial. But for people who are really looking to engage, which means that we are going to have to be vulnerable ourselves, and we are going to have to sacrifice not who we are, but how much of this do we really want to fight versus how much of it do we really want to build? Because there's a difference in how we communicate, and there's a difference in how we interact at this point for me. So I'm going to look at one more question here before we end. And again, I hope to answer your question. If not, I do apologize, but that's just from my experience. Oh, let's see. My impression is there are people in my rural Southwest Washington community who just have no interest in being anything other than who they are. I see them posting and sharing racist things. As a white person who wants to do the work, I feel a responsibility to build a better relationship with these folks. But at the same time, I don't think that they're open to hearing another perspective. Is it a lost cause to put energy there, or is that exactly what I'm being called to do? P.S. My next door neighbor is part of this group. I feel a little stuck with this type of person. Thanks. All right. So, and I'm just smiling because thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your transparency. And yes, I think this is exactly what we're being called to do. Since I've lived here, I moved to the coast in 2014. I was living in Western Washington before I moved down here. The last place I was in Redmond, Washington before I moved here. I was in Cannon Beach for a couple of months before I moved down to Wheeler. Wheeler has a community population of, I want to say, 250 people. All right, that is the town of Wheeler. Manzanita has about 600. Nehalem probably has about 450, somewhere in there. So these are really, really small communities. We had a gentleman who moved to Nehalem for the specific purpose of using it as an experiment to try to take over our local government, as that was the way to affect change. And he was biracial, and race became a factor in that process. And so a rebuttal to his platform, there was something created called Keep Nehalem Nehalem. And I was disturbed at first by the Keep Nehalem Nehalem, because I was like, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, how far back are we trying to keep Nehalem Nehalem? Because there was a time in Nehalem that I would not have been welcome there. So how far back are we trying to keep Nehalem Nehalem? And I was able to have these conversations with the people who created Keep Nehalem Nehalem, because I wanted to build community. Are we going to agree on everything? No. The majority of people that I hang around wear Make America Great hats again. Um, it is what it is. But I care more about the person. There are things even in my family, you know, we have different ideas of the same thing, and it's okay. But it's how much are you willing? It's the give and take, right? So we have to all be willing to be part of a growing process and patience. And why I changed this presentation from what it was originally, again, is because I'm trying to build a foundation that will sustain our communities, so that we don't have to have these conversations 50 years from now. That hopefully we can move to a different place, not because we've changed laws, but because the community is better. The people who make up the community are better. So with that, we are almost to 3 o'clock mark. I want to thank you again for being with us during this time. I'm going to pull my screen up one more time. And I'm not sure if there is a way to capture all of the messages. I'm fairly still new to doing these Zoom calls, but we will try. Or if you want to email me your message, I will respond that way as well. But I'm going to try to actually copy and paste them right now just so I have them, because this will give me some great context for the conversations that we need to continue to be having during this time. And so I just want to get that out the way. And so now we're just going to take another moment. Part of what I find in this work is every so often I mess up. And it's hard when we mess up to want to keep moving forward. I'll say something, you know, maybe that offended someone, not because I intended to, but that's what happened. Or I say something that someone doesn't agree with, and then, you know, I'm still learning. Even though I've grown, I think very well in this, that I cannot appease everyone. I do know I have a platform, so I do take responsibility for my words. And so I'm not trying to pass off that responsibility, but we got to stay in a place of learning. And if all of us, even as we are doing the work and entering into these conversations and platforms, if we stay open, and maybe come with less preconceived ideas of what could happen, what's going to happen, and see just what might happen, I think life might surprise you. And so if we'll just take a moment as we finish, we're going to pause and go into just a mindfulness moment of being able to find a place for forgiveness for yourself. I'm not talking about you forgiving others, but if you would just find a place for forgiveness within yourself right now and begin to surround that place with love. I've learned in my own personal experience that I couldn't grow to be a better person until I even loved the things that I didn't love about myself, because those parts of me were still part of who I was, and I had to learn how to love that place as well. And so I thank you guys for joining us today. I'm going to put up this screen just so you can, if I can figure it out, maybe I won't. My contact information, LaNicia Duke is my name, LA, capital NICIA. The presentation will be posted on YouTube, so it will be available for you to share. Please reach out to me. I would love your feedback. I think the next time we do this, I might try to get a survey out before, so that we can do a pre and post and see how the growth even in these discussions are happening for us individually and collectively. I thank you for investing your time with me today, and know that we didn't get here overnight, and it's going to take some time to get out of where we are. But I think we need to find that common place of where we are, because I feel like we're kind of scattered right now. And so I'm going to leave it with that. And Alyssa, do we have anything that you want to do before we close?
Thank you for today. Thank you all for coming.
And many blessings to you all. I pray, I send light, love, energy your way. I pray protection over your hearts, over your minds, over your words, over your actions, so that they are received with the intention of love. And even in having to have really hard conversations right now, and even being in an uncomfortable place for ourselves, I really, really do hope that I do want to see a better world. And I think it looks different depending on where we are, what our part is in that, and what it looks like for our communities. And so again, just thank you. Thank you again, Caverly, for allowing me to share in this time. And Godspeed to you all, and we'll be here again soon, I hope. Thank you.